Okay, we're outside shooting some baskets, and it reminded me of today's class. You know, we just finished up scatter plots and data collections. Now we're going to move on to interpreting graphs. We talked a little bit about this today in class, in most of my classes. So I want to go ahead and just briefly discuss it again and just give you kind of a video log of the notes on interpreting graphs so that you always have that handy if you ever need to go back to it. The reason why the shooting baskets is such a unique activity when we talk about graphs is because when you track the path of a basketball, especially a ball that goes into the air, and you watch it bounce, then it actually creates a unique graph. We've seen, we drew it today, but I also want to do it again. I want to draw it again, and I want to show you what you're actually seeing when that ball starts to bounce and what happens. So we're going to take another quick look at a basketball bouncing, its path, and how to interpret or tell the story of the graph of the basketball. Go. All right, we're going to watch the basketball as it bounces. You can see all those tiny little bounces, and then it begins to roll, and then it hits the yard. So let's go ahead and graph that. Okay, so now we're going to graph what we just did, or what we just saw with the basketball. Okay? My son threw the basketball, so it actually started with the height. And again, if this is our graph, this side would be height. Okay? And this side would be time. So at time 0, he was holding the ball. So it had some kind of height. Then the ball went up in the air. Okay? And then it came down to the 0, which would be the ground. Okay? Then the ball bounced again a little lower, and a little lower, and a little lower, and a little lower, and then it started to roll towards the grass. So there was no more bounce. So again, the ball was thrown into the air, it bounced, it bounced, it bounced, it bounced, it bounced, and then it rolled. So that's the picture of the graph of the basketball. So you can see that it tells a story. It doesn't quite look like a bounce up and down, but that's what tells the story. So this is the graph of our basketball, the path of our basketball. Okay, so interpreting graphs is actually really easy, but I want to give you a couple things to pay attention to. So some keys to remember. Some keys to remember is 1, pay close attention to the independent and dependent variables. If you remember what we talked about, the independent variable is the variable that is along the x-axis. So in the scenario with the basketball goal, our time was our independent variable because our time, as you can see right there, is along the x-axis. Okay? So we need to pay attention to make sure that we're reading the graph or telling the story based on our independent variable, which is our time, and our dependent variable, which is over here, which is our height along the y-axis. So independent variable along the x-axis, dependent variable along the y-axis. Those are the two main, most important things to pay attention to when telling that story. Along with that, another key to remember is you can't always assume the picture tells the story. Don't always assume the picture tells the story, because if you do that, you'll start looking at the graph and you'll start to assume that things are happening that aren't really happening in that graph. For example, we like to look at a curved graph and think that somebody is running fast and then they slow down. But when in reality, it could be that somebody is moving further away from an object and close back to it. So, again, interpreting graphs is really easy. It's about telling the story of what happened, just like in our scenario with the basketball, about what happened based on the independent and dependent variables. Interpreting graphs should be an easy money question for when you take the STAR exam.